Calisthenics.
On Tuesday, June 13th, we commemorate Saint Aquilina, the martyr of Syria, Theophilos, the bishop of Nicosia. Regarding Saint Lucillian of Byzantium. Formerly a priest of the idols near Nicomedia, the saint came to the Christian faith in his old age. This was during the reign of Aurelian. Lucillian was brought before Sylvan, the count. When he refused to return to the service of the idols, his jaw was broken. He was beaten with rods and hanged upside down, then imprisoned with 4 Christians, who were all children, Claudius, Hypatius, Paul, and Dionysius. All of them were brought out again before Sylvan, and remaining constant in their faith, were cast into a raging furnace. Preserved unharmed, they were sent to Byzantium, where the children were beheaded, and Lucillian was crucified. The Virgin Paula, a Christian, buried their holy relics. For this, she was taken before the count, and refusing to sacrifice to the idols, was stripped naked and mercilessly thrashed. After other torments, she was beheaded in 270. There was a church in their honor in Constantinople. Let us all entreat Christ the Lord's holy martyrs, for they make supplication for our soul's salvation. With faith, with longing, therefore let us draw nigh unto them, for they overflow with the divine grace of healings, and they drive away the ranks of demons and terrors as guardians of the faith. Regarding St. Kevin of Glendalough. St. Kevin was born in the year 498 in the Irish province of Leinster to noble parents, perhaps even descendants of the kings of Leinster. Tradition holds that when he was born, his mother felt no labor pains, and the snow that fell on the day of his birth melted as it fell around the house. An angel is said to have appeared during the child's baptism, telling his parents that the child should be named Kevin. St. Cronin, the officiating priest, said, "This was surely an angel of the Lord, and as he named the child, so shall he be called." So the babe was baptized Kevin. Cogman in the Irish tongue, which means he of blessed birth, is the first person in history to be called Kevin. His childhood was marked by a horrible temper and dislike of other people, although he loved animals. This is one of the reasons why St. Kevin is one of the patron saints of animals. At the age of 7, his parents sent him to the monastery run by St. Petroc in Cornwall, where, while there, Kevin was kneeling, his arms outstretched in prayer, on the first day of Lent in a small hut in the wilderness, when a blackbird landed in his palm and proceeded to construct a nest. Kevin remained perfectly still so as to not disturb the bird. For the whole of Lent, Kevin was led by the blackbird with berries and nuts. Kevin was fed by the blackbird with berries and nuts. By the end of Lent, the blackbird hatchlings had flown from the nest, which now lay empty in his hand, and Kevin returned to the monastery for the Paschal celebration. After being ordained to the priesthood, Kevin spent 7 years as a hermit in the mountains surrounding Glendalough, which comes from the Gaelic word glen, meaning valley, and lough, meaning lake, meaning valley of the 2 lakes. He lived in a small 5 by 7 by 3 foot cave, now known as St. Kevin's bed, which was, legends holds, shown to him by an angel. His life was spent in prayer and self-denial, and he lived off herbs and fish. An otter that lived in the lake would bring Kevin whatever Kevin visited the lake, which he did in the winter, when he would stand up to his neck in the ice-cold water to pray. During one of these sessions of prayer in the upper lake of Glendalough, which he preferred to the lower lake because it was much more remote and colder, he dropped his breviary into the lake. An otter appeared from the bottom of the lake with a prayer book, unstained and damaged in any way, in its mouth. Henceforth the otter would bring fish to Kevin for food. Kevin returned to society when a farmer named Dima followed a cow of his who would constantly wander off. The cow would come every day when the herd was sent out to pasture to St. Kevin's cave and lick his clothes and feet while he was in prayer. When the cow returned at evening, she would produce unbelievable amounts of milk. Dima, wondering greatly about this, one day resolved to follow the cow. When Dima stumbled upon Kevin's cave and saw what was the cause of this, he fell to his knees in penitence. Kevin raised him up, and as Dima was a pagan, taught the farmer about Christ and the gospel. Dima eventually begged Kevin to come out of his isolation and teach his family about Christ. After a day of prayer, Kevin saw that it was God's will that he return to society to spread the gospel. He began by teaching Dima's family, but his tutelage soon grew to dozens of families, and he began to attract followers. And so, seeing the need of a central place from which to teach, Kevin decided to establish a monastery. However, Kevin could not establish a monastery since King O'Toole of Glendalough, a pagan, would not allow it. It happened that the king had a much-beloved pet goose, which was now old and gray. As time passed, the goose also became so aged and weak that it was soon unable to fly. As a result, the king was very upset, for he loved the goose very much. Hearing of Kevin's sanctity and power, the pagan king sent for him, and asked that he make the beloved goose young. Kevin asked for a payment of whatever land the goose would fly over. As the goose could no longer take flight, O'Toole agreed. When Kevin touched the bird, it grew young, and flew over the entire valley of Glendalough, and on that site the monastery was established. Rocks were plentiful. The farmers pitched in and built Kevin a monastery in the solitude of Glendalough. The workers agreed to work from when the larks woke till the lambs slept. The grueling work schedule began to affect the quality of construction, and Kevin decided to investigate. It turned out that the larks were apt to rise unfashionably early, and so Kevin told them not to. From that day forth, no skylark ever has been heard in Glendalough. The construction continued, and the monastery was complete. Soon other monks came to help teach all who would come to learn, old and young, rich and poor alike. More buildings were added to the little settlement. Among them was the famous tower, which still stands today, along with the large huts used by St. Kevin. Many people from far afield came to Kevin for advice, which he gave freely, and the monastery grew to such fame and renown that it was considered equal to a pilgrimage to Rome for a penitent to travel 7 times to Glendalough Monastery. It is said of Kevin that he was the fulfillment of the prophecy of St. Patrick, that he was the one to come who would evangelize the region of Ireland just south of Dublin. Kevin went once, upon the founding of his monastery, to Rome, where he received relics for the monastery. Many years later, his hair and beard white but his eyes sparkling, and his step quick and firm, he felt the desire to go once again to Rome. However, he also knew he was bound to the duties of the abbot as the abbot of the monastery. He went for advice to his old friend, Bishop Kieran of Plumenois. Kieran understood Kevin's longing, but he knew that it was better for one's missionary to train many others than to leave others half-trained in order to go to the missions himself. Birds do not hatch their eggs while they are flying, Kieran said. Kevin saw that not to go was a sacrifice, and he knew now where God's will lay. So Kevin continued to teach and advise everyone who came to him until the peaceful June night in 618, when his soul sped heavenward to join the angels and saints around God's throne. The precise location of Kevin's grave is lost, although it is said that at dusk, when no one is about, blackbirds will flock to an unmarked cross above a forgotten grave, the grave of a wild boy who held the blackbird's nest in his unwavering outstretched hands for 40 days. Because of St. Kevin's affinity for animals, there are many miracles that are attached to him. It is said that a hunting party was chasing a boar with hounds. The boar came upon St. Kevin in prayer beneath a tree and laid down at his feet. The hounds, when they saw the boar at Kevin's feet, also lay down near the saint, not daring to approach the boar while it was under Kevin's protection. The men decided to ignore these signs and to go ahead and slay the boar. However, a flock of birds landed on the tree, and the hunters took this as a sign and left the boar with Kevin. Thou wast privileged to live to the age of saints, O Father Kevin, being baptized by one saint, taught by another, and buried by a third. Pray to God that he will raise up saints in the hour and the day to our help, support, and guide us to the way of salvation. This Saturday of Souls, the Saturday of Souls before Pentecost, is the original Saturday of Souls. Saturday is the Day of the Dead, in which it is the most appropriate time to commemorate those who have passed on. And so this Saturday before the Feast of Pentecost commemorates all those who have died believing in the faith. Only Creator, who out of the depths of wisdom lovingly govern all things, and upon all bestow what is accordingly best for them, give rest to the souls of your servants, for they have placed in their hope in you, our author and maker and God. The Epistle from St. Paul's first letter to the Thessalonians. But we would not have you ignorant, brethren, concerning those who are asleep, that you may not grieve as others do, who have no hope. Meaning that the Sadducees and the pagans, they believe that when someone dies, that's it. They're in the earth. They're gone. For since we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so, through Jesus, God will bring with him those who have fallen asleep. For this we declare to you by the word of the Lord, that we who are alive, who are left until the coming of the Lord, shall not precede those who have fallen asleep. In other words, those who died first will be judged first to enter into the kingdom. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a cry of command, with the archangel's call, and with the sound of the trumpet of God. This is talking about the second coming, when Christ will come to judge the whole world. And the dead in Christ will rise first. In other words, at that time, all of our bodies will rise from the dead, and our souls be reunited with our body, and will enter into heaven whole. And the dead in Christ will rise first. Then we who are alive, who are left, shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so we shall always be with the Lord. This is the epistle that is read at every funeral. The Gospel according to St. John. At that time Jesus revealed himself to the disciples after he was raised from the dead, and he said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Now it must be understood that when Jesus Christ is saying to Simon Peter, "Do you love me?" he's using the word agape, selfless love. Whereas Peter does not answer with agape. He answers with philo. There's a difference. Agape is the kind of love that is selfless. Opposite ego, me, selfless love. Whereas philo, the love that Peter is saying, is the love that is for a friend. So let's look at the Greek. Simon Iona agapasme leon touton. Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Legi αυτό, he says to him, Ne Kyrie, si idas oti philose. So we see here that this is different. Legi αυτό voske ta arniam. Feed my lambs, he says to him. He says to him a second time, Legi αυτό palin defteron. Simon Iona agapasme. Simon, son of John, do you love me? And he's saying it a second time, and using the love, agapasme, selfless love. Do you have selfless love for me? Legi αυτό, he says to him, Ne Kyrie, si idas oti philose. So again, Peter answers with, I love you. But he's not saying I love you with the selfless love of agapas. He's using philo, friendly love. Bimene ta provatamu, tend to my sheep. Legi αυτό το τρίτον, he says to him a third time, Simon Iona, philisme. We notice something different here. Jesus Christ is now changing the way he speaks to Peter. Simon, son of John, do you love me at least as a friend? And so he has lowered the standard. He has brought down the bar for Peter. Elepithi o Petros. Peter was grieved. Oti ipen αυτό το τρίτον philisme. Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, do you love me? Now, in the English, we think that he's upset because he asked him 3 times. Now, this is important because Peter is being redeemed by these 3 loves because Peter denied Christ 3 times. But Peter is not upset that Christ is redeeming him. He's very aware of what Christ is doing. He's the leader of the disciples. He is grieved because Christ has lowered the standard. He has taken the high bar of selfless love, agape, and lowered it to philo. And this is important because Peter is being honest. He does not have selfless love. He was selfish. He abandoned Christ and denied him. But Christ is giving him the way back. Και είπεν αυτό, Kyrie, si πάντα είδας, Lord, you know everything. Si ginoskis oti philose. You know everything. You see and you know that I love you. And again, Peter says, philose. Legi αυτό ο Ιησούς, voske ta provatamo. Feed my sheep. So this is very important because not only does it show us the importance of the Greek to understand the language of what is happening here, but it is also showing us how Peter is being redeemed and how Christ our God lowers the bar to where we are so that we can rise to meet him. Because obviously Peter through his life will rise to that occasion. Truly, truly I say to you, when you were young, you girded yourself and walked where you would. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will gird you and carry you where you do not wish to go. This he said to show by what death he was to glorify to God. So in other words, Peter is going to be crucified. After this, he said to him, "Follow me." Peter turned and saw following them the disciple whom Jesus loved, who had lain close to his breast at the supper and had said, "Lord, who is it that is going to betray you?" So he sees John the theologian, the brother of James, the sons of Zebedee. And John is the one that followed Jesus. He's the one that was at the cross with Christ our God and has always shown himself to be a devout follower of Christ. So Peter's asking, and what about him? And this is something that's very common, because not all outcomes in life are equal. And so Peter's saying, okay, I'm going to crucified. I'm going to die horribly for you. What about him? Jesus said to him, "If it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? Follow me." So in other words, what does it matter? However I deal with him, that's not for you. My relationship is with you. You follow me. And this is important, because we need to follow our own relationship with Christ and not worry about other people, not look at other people's outcomes and say, well, what about him or what about her? No, that has nothing to do with us. We follow Christ. It's our own relationship, our own crosses to bear, to carry. And so we must follow. The saying spread among the brethren that this disciple was not to die. But Jesus did not say that he was not to die, but if it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? So in other words, this was not a prophecy of saying John's never going to die. John did die. It was basically saying, if I wanted him to not die, that has nothing to do with you. This is the disciple who is bearing witness to these things, and who has written these things, and we know that his testimony is true. But there are also many other things that Jesus did. Now, this is also critically important, because when people ask, well, where is this written in the Scriptures? You can always turn to this. John himself says it. Jesus did many other things, but they're not written down, because the books could not be contained. Were every one of them to be written, I suppose the world itself could not contain the books that would be written. This is how the gospel concludes, meaning that what is written here is written so that we may know that Christ is our Savior, that this is our textbook. It is not the comprehensive biography of Jesus Christ. And so it's very, very important that we understand that our journey to Christ, our God, is personal. And that Christ our God gives us the medicine specific for us. He meets us where we are at. It is a very unique relationship that we have with our God. So let us all follow him. I hope that you've enjoyed today's Spiritual Calisthenics. Have a blessed and wonderful day.